In a quiet, dusty town nestled between rolling hills and endless fields, life moved at a slow pace. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. Whispers traveled faster than the wind, and opportunities for young people were as rare as rain in a drought. It was here that Amara grew up, a shy, soft-spoken teenager with dreams bigger than the sky but circumstances smaller than a mustard seed. Amara lived alone in a tiny, weathered house on the edge of town. Her parents had passed away years ago, in a tragic accident, leaving her to fend for herself. With no relatives nearby, she relied on odd jobs and the kindness of neighbors to get by. She worked after school cleaning houses, running errands, and sometimes helping out at the local bakery. Despite the hardships, Amara never complained. She carried herself with quiet dignity, always wearing a faint smile that masked the weight of her struggles. At school, however, things weren't so easy. Amara didn't have fancy clothes or shiny accessories like the other kids. Her uniform was patched together in places, her shoes scuffed from years of wear, and her backpack held together with duct tape. To many of her classmates, these outward signs made her an easy target. They called her names behind her back, Raggedy Amara or Patchwork Girl. Some days they ignored her completely, treating her as though she didn't exist. Other days they teased her mercilessly, pointing out everything they thought was wrong with her appearance. But what no one realized was that beneath Amara's quiet exterior lay a treasure, a voice so powerful it could bring tears to your eyes, or make you want to dance under the stars. Music had been her refuge since childhood. Her mother, a church choir singer, used to teach her songs while they cooked dinner together. After her parents' death, singing became Amara's way of coping. Late at night, when loneliness crept in, she'd sit by her bedroom window and let her voice fill the silence. But during the day, she kept this part of herself hidden, afraid of being judged even more harshly than she already was. One sunny afternoon, Amara sat alone at her usual spot in the cafeteria, a corner table near the windows. The chatter of students filled the air as trays clattered and laughter echoed off the walls. She picked at her lunch, a plain sandwich wrapped in wax paper, and tried to ignore the stares from a group of popular students sitting nearby. They were the ones who always seemed to be at the center of attention, their designer outfits and confident smiles making them untouchable in the eyes of most kids. Suddenly, one of them, a tall, lanky boy named Marcus, stood up and walked over to Amara's table. His friends watched curiously, snickering as he approached. Marcus leaned against the table, his smirk widening as he looked down at her. "Hey, Raggedy Amara," he said loudly enough for others to hear. "What's with the old lady outfit? You trying to look like someone's grandma?" A few nearby students giggled nervously, unsure whether to join in or stay silent. Amara kept her head down, focusing intently on her sandwich as if willing herself to become invisible. But Marcus wasn't done. He gestured dramatically toward her worn-out shoes. "Seriously, where'd you get those? A thrift store clearance? Rack?" This time the laughter grew louder, spreading across the room like wildfire. More students turned to look, some craning their necks to see what was happening. Amara felt her cheeks burn with shame, but she refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Instead, she tightened her grip on her sandwich and stayed silent. Encouraged by the reaction, Marcus decided to take things further. "You know," he said, leaning closer, "I heard poor people are supposed to be good at stuff like singing. Like, isn't that how they make money on the streets or something?" His friends burst into laughter and a few others joined in, eager to be part of the spectacle. Marcus grinned triumphantly. "Come on, Amara. Show us what you've got. Sing something for us." The request hung in the air, heavy and mocking. Amara froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She hated being put on the spot like this, especially in front of so many people. Part of her wanted to stand up and walk away, to leave the cafeteria and escape the humiliation. But another part, a deeper, stronger part, felt a flicker of defiance. Why should she run? Why should she let them win? As the teasing continued, Amara glanced around the room. Dozens of faces stared back at her, some amused, some curious, and a few sympathetic. She thought about all the times she'd been overlooked, dismissed, or treated as less than human. And then she remembered her mother's words, "Your voice is your power, baby. Don't let anyone take that away from you. For a moment, the noise around her faded, replaced by memories of her childhood. She saw her mother standing in the kitchen, swaying gently as she sang hymns. She heard her father clapping along, his deep laugh filling the room. Those moments had been her happiest, her safest. And now, surrounded by cruelty and judgment, Amara realized she couldn't let fear silence her anymore. Slowly, she placed her sandwich back on the tray and stood up. The room fell eerily quiet as everyone waited to see what she would do next. Marcus crossed his arms, still smirking, clearly expecting her to storm off in tears. But instead, Amara took a deep breath and looked him straight in the eye. Then, without saying a word, she opened her mouth and began to sing. The moment Amara began to sing, the cafeteria seemed to hold its breath. Her voice wasn't loud at first. It started soft, almost hesitant, like a whisper carried by the wind. But even in those initial notes, there was something undeniable about it. It was rich, warm, and filled with emotion, as though every word she sang carried the weight of her struggles, her dreams, and her resilience. The song she chose was one her mother used to sing, a simple hymn about hope and faith. But in Amara's voice, it became something extraordinary. At first, Marcus and his friends didn't know how to react. Their smirks faltered slightly as they exchanged confused glances. They had expected her to either refuse or stumble awkwardly, giving them more ammunition for their teasing. Instead, Amara stood tall, her eyes closed as if shutting out the world around her. Her hands rested lightly on the edge of the table, steadying her, but her posture radiated confidence. For someone who usually faded into the background, she suddenly seemed larger than life. As the first verse unfolded, the room grew quieter still. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, forks clattered onto trays, and students turned their heads toward the source of the sound. Even those who weren't paying attention before found themselves drawn in, unable to look away. There was something magnetic about Amara's voice. It pulled people in, demanding nothing yet offering everything. Each note soared higher, filling the space with an energy that felt both intimate and universal. By the time she reached the chorus, Amara's voice had transformed completely. What began as a tentative melody now exploded into a crescendo of raw emotion. Every syllable rang clear and true, resonating deep within the hearts of everyone listening. Some students leaned forward unconsciously, their faces reflecting awe and disbelief. Others simply sat frozen, mouths slightly open as if trying to process what they were witnessing. Marcus, who had been so quick to mock her moments earlier, now stood rooted to the spot. His arms, which he had crossed defiantly over his chest, slowly fell to his sides. He blinked several times as though unsure whether this was real or some kind of trick. His usual bravado crumbled under the sheer power of Amara's performance. Behind him, his friends mirrored his reaction, their earlier laughter replaced by stunned silence. Amara didn't notice any of this. She was lost in the music, pouring her soul into every word. Memories flooded her mind, the laughter she shared with her parents, the nights spent crying alone after their passing, the countless mornings she woke up determined to keep going despite the odds. All of it came pouring out through her voice, raw and unfiltered. It wasn't just a song anymore, it was her story, her truth, laid bare for everyone to hear. As the final notes hung in the air, the entire cafeteria remained silent. Not a single cough, shuffle, or whisper broke the spell. Time itself seemed to pause, suspended in the wake of Amara's performance. Slowly, she opened her eyes, blinking against the bright fluorescent lights overhead. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from the intensity of what she had just done. She glanced around the room, half expecting the mocking to resume, but instead she saw something she never imagined possible. Respect. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then, almost instinctively, applause began to ripple through the crowd. At first it was scattered, just a few brave individuals clapping hesitantly, but soon it grew louder and more unified. Students rose to their feet, cheering and whistling as though they were at a concert. Those who had teased her most mercilessly earlier were now among the loudest supporters, clapping enthusiastically, as if trying to make up for their earlier behavior. Even Marcus looked genuinely moved. His face flushed with embarrassment as he realized the gravity of what he'd done. He stepped back, allowing others to approach Amara, who stood there wide-eyed and overwhelmed. A girl named Tanya, who had always been friendly but never overly close, rushed forward and hugged her tightly. "That was incredible," Tanya exclaimed, tears glistening in her eyes. "I had no idea you could sing like that." Others followed suit, surrounding Amara with words of admiration and encouragement. Someone handed her a napkin to wipe away, the tears streaming down her cheeks. Not tears of sadness, but of relief and joy. For the first time in years, Amara felt seen, not as the poor girl with patched-up clothes, but as someone worthy of love and respect. Teachers, alerted by the commotion, entered the cafeteria to investigate. When they learned what had happened, they too joined in celebrating Amara's talent. Mrs. Dawson, the music teacher, approached her with a broad smile. "Amara," she said warmly, "that was absolutely breathtaking. Have you ever thought about joining the choir, or maybe participating in our upcoming talent show?" Amara shook her head shyly, still processing everything that had transpired. I don't know," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. But Mrs. Dawson wasn't deterred. "Well, you should think about it," she insisted. "A voice like yours deserves to be heard." As the excitement gradually died down and students returned to their lunches, Amara remained at the center of attention. People continued to congratulate her, ask questions about her singing, and express how moved they were by her performance. Though part of her wanted to retreat into the safety of solitude, another part relished the warmth of acceptance she had longed for all these years. Later that evening, as Amara walked home under the golden glow of the setting sun, she couldn't help but replay the events of the day in her mind. She thought about the cruel words that had been hurled at her, the mocking laughter that had echoed through the cafeteria, and then the transformation that occurred when she chose to use her voice. It hadn't just silenced her tormentors. It had awakened something in everyone who heard it. For the first time in a long time, Amara allowed herself to dream. Maybe this was her chance to step out of the shadows and embrace the gift she had been given. Maybe, just maybe, her voice could take her places she had never dared to imagine. As she opened the creaky door to her tiny house and stepped inside, she smiled softly to herself. Today had been a turning point, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light could shine through. And Amara knew, deep in her heart, that her journey was only beginning. The days that followed Amara's unforgettable performance in the cafeteria were unlike anything she had ever experienced. Word of her incredible voice spread like wildfire, not just through the school but throughout the entire town. Students, who had barely acknowledged her existence before, now greeted her with smiles and compliments in the hallways. Teachers encouraged her to participate in upcoming events, and even strangers approached her on the street to express how moved they were by her singing. For someone who had spent years feeling invisible, this sudden wave of attention was both exhilarating and overwhelming. But what truly changed everything was the power of technology. In today's world, moments like Amara's don't stay confined to a single room. They travel far beyond, thanks to smartphones and social media. Several students had recorded snippets of her performance on their phones, capturing the raw emotion in her voice and the stunned reactions of those around her. These videos quickly made their way online, shared across platforms like wildfire. Within hours, hashtags like Tiori Amara Sings and Tiori Voice of Hope began trending, drawing millions of views from people all over the country, and eventually, the world. Comments poured in from every corner of the internet. Some viewers praised her vocal talent, calling it heaven-sent and unbelievable. Others focused on her courage, marveling at how she had turned a moment of cruelty into something beautiful. Many shared their own stories of overcoming bullying or hardship, saying that Amara's voice inspired them to keep fighting. One comment stood out to Amara in particular. "You reminded me that we are more than what others say about us. Thank you for being brave enough to show your light." As the days passed, Amara found herself thrust into a spotlight she hadn't anticipated. Local news outlets reached out to interview her, eager to tell her story. At first she hesitated. She wasn't used to talking about herself, let alone speaking on camera. But with encouragement from Mrs. Dawson, the music teacher, and a few close friends, she agreed to share her journey. Sitting in front of the microphone for her first interview, Amara spoke softly but sincerely. She talked about losing her parents, growing up in poverty, and finding solace in music. When asked about the incident in the cafeteria, she didn't shy away from the truth. "I was scared," she admitted, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I thought they were going to laugh at me again. But then I remembered my mom always telling me, 'Your voice is your power.' And I realized I didn't have to be afraid anymore. If I could make even one person feel something, then it would be worth it." Her honesty resonated deeply with audiences. People weren't just captivated by her voice. They were inspired by her resilience. Messages of support flooded her inbox. Some from classmates, others from complete strangers who felt connected to her story. A local business owner even offered to sponsor her education, covering tuition fees and providing resources to help her pursue formal vocal training. It was as though the entire community had rallied behind her, determined to see her succeed. At school, things shifted dramatically. The same students who had once teased her now went out of their way to include her. Marcus, the boy who had mocked her in the cafeteria, became surprisingly supportive. He apologized publicly during an assembly, admitting that he had been wrong to treat her the way he did. "Amara showed us all something important that day," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "She showed us that everyone has value, no matter where they come from or what they look like. I'll never forget that lesson." Though Amara accepted his apology graciously, she didn't dwell on the past. Instead, she focused on using her newfound platform to create positive change. With Mrs. Dawson's guidance, she joined the school choir and began preparing for the annual talent show. Rehearsals became her sanctuary, a place where she could lose herself in the music and connect with others who shared her passion. For the first time in years, she felt like she belonged somewhere. Meanwhile, the viral videos continued to gain traction. Music producers and talent scouts took notice, reaching out to offer opportunities for collaboration. One producer even flew to the small town to meet Amara in person, bringing along a team to record a professional demo of her singing. Standing in the makeshift studio set up in the school auditorium, Amara felt a mix of nerves and excitement. As she sang, the producer listened intently, nodding approvingly. Afterward, he shook her hand and said, "You've got something special, kid, something the world needs to hear." Despite the whirlwind of attention, Amara remained grounded. She knew that fame wasn't the end goal. It was simply a means to inspire others and honor the memory of her parents. Every night she sat by her bedroom window just as she had done countless times before and wrote letters to her mother and father. Though they were no longer there to see her triumphs, she believed they were watching over her somehow. "I hope you're proud of me," she whispered one evening, gazing at the stars. "Because I'm finally learning to be proud of myself." As weeks turned into months, Amara embraced her role as a symbol of hope and perseverance. She visited nearby schools to speak about the importance of kindness and self-belief, sharing her story with students who might be facing similar challenges. She also started working with a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting underprivileged youth, using her voice to raise funds and awareness for their programs. Through it all, she held on to the lessons she had learned, that true strength comes from within, and that even in the face of adversity, we have the power to rise above. By the time the school's talent show arrived, Amara had become a household name in the community. Posters advertising the event featured her smiling face alongside bold letters that read, "Hear the voice that inspired a town." On the night of the performance, the auditorium was packed with cheering fans, students, teachers, family, friends, and even reporters eager to capture the magic once again. When Amara stepped onto the stage, bathed in soft golden light, the crowd erupted into applause. Dressed in a simple yet elegant gown borrowed from a neighbor, she looked radiant, not because of the clothes, but because of the confidence shining in her eyes. As she began to sing, the room fell silent once more, hanging on to every note. This time, however, there was no trace of fear or doubt in her expression. She sang with joy, with purpose, knowing that her voice had already touched countless lives. When the final note faded, the audience leaped to their feet, clapping and cheering until their hands hurt. Tears streamed down faces, including Amara's own, as she soaked in the love and admiration surrounding her. In that moment, she realized that her journey wasn't just about proving herself to others. It was about discovering who she truly was and embracing the gifts she had been given. And as she bowed gracefully, her heart full of gratitude, she knew that this was only the beginning of a much bigger story. The aftermath of Amara's rise to local fame brought a whirlwind of changes that transformed her life in ways she could never have imagined. The talent show was just the beginning, a stepping stone that catapulted her into opportunities far beyond the small town where she had grown up. As videos of her performances continued to circulate online, her story resonated with people from all walks of life. What started as a moment of defiance in a school cafeteria had become a beacon of hope for countless individuals who saw themselves in her journey. One of the most significant shifts came when a well-known music producer named Mr. Harrison reached out to her. He had seen one of the viral videos and immediately recognized something special in Amara's voice, not just its technical brilliance, but the raw emotion behind it. "Your voice tells a story," he told her during their first meeting. "And stories like yours are what the world needs right now." With his guidance, Amara began working on her first professional recording session. It wasn't easy. She had never been inside a real studio before, but her determination made up for any lack of experience. Each time she stepped behind the microphone, she poured her heart into every lyric, channeling not only her own struggles but also the collective pain and triumph of those who had supported her along the way. While the excitement of pursuing music professionally thrilled her, Amara remained deeply connected to her roots. She refused to let success change who she was at her core. Every weekend she returned to her tiny house on the edge of town, cooking meals for herself and occasionally inviting neighbors over for dinner. She still worked part-time at the bakery, insisting that she needed to stay grounded and remember where she came from. Her humility endeared her even more to the community, which had rallied around her since the day of her cafeteria performance. Her growing popularity also gave her a platform to speak out against bullying and advocate for kindness. Schools across the region invited her to share her story, hoping to inspire students to treat one another with respect. During these talks, Amara didn't shy away from discussing the pain she had endured. She spoke candidly about the teasing, the loneliness, and the moments when she doubted her worth. But she always ended on a hopeful note, emphasizing the importance of resilience and self-belief. "You don't have to be perfect to be valuable," she would say, her voice steady and strong. "And you don't have to face challenges alone. There's always someone willing to listen if you're brave enough to ask." Her message struck a chord with young people, many of whom reached out to thank her for giving them the courage to stand up for themselves or others. One letter, written by a middle school girl named Mia, stood out among the rest. "I used to think I wasn't good enough because kids at my school made fun of me," Mia wrote. "But after hearing your story, I realized I can be proud of who I am. Thank you for showing me that being different isn't a bad thing. It's what makes us special." Amara kept every letter she received, tucking them into a shoebox under her bed. They served as reminders of why she had chosen to embrace her voice, not for fame or fortune, but to make a difference in the lives of others. She knew firsthand how isolating it felt to believe no one cared, and she vowed never to let anyone else feel that way if she could help it. As word of her advocacy work spread, Amara attracted attention from national organizations dedicated to empowering marginalized youth. One such group offered her a partnership, asking her to headline a series of benefit concerts aimed at raising funds for scholarships and mentorship programs. These events brought together thousands of people, filling arenas with cheers and applause. Amara performed alongside other artists who shared her passion for social justice, creating an atmosphere of unity and celebration. Between songs, she addressed the crowds, urging them to support causes larger than themselves. "We're stronger together," she declared, her voice echoing through the venue. "When we lift each other up, there's nothing we can't achieve." Back home, the impact of her success was evident everywhere she went. The town council organized a fundraiser to renovate the old community center, naming it the Amara Arts Center in her honor. Local businesses donated materials and labor, while volunteers painted murals and installed sound equipment. When the center officially opened its doors, Amara stood on stage once again, this time addressing a crowd of familiar faces. "This place is proof that dreams really do come true," she said, her eyes glistening with tears. "Not just mine, but everyone's. Let's use it to create art, spread kindness, and build a brighter future, for ourselves and for generations to come." Despite the accolades and achievements, Amara faced challenges too. Fame came with its own set of pressures, including criticism from people who doubted her authenticity or accused her of exploiting her past for attention. Some commenters on social media questioned whether she deserved her success, suggesting that her story was exaggerated or fabricated. At first, these negative voices rattled her confidence, making her question whether she was doing enough to deserve the love and support she had received. But with the help of Mrs. Dawson and her close friends, she learned to tune out the noise and focus on staying true to herself. "You can't please everyone," Mrs. Dawson reminded her one afternoon as they sat together in the music room. "What matters is that you know why you're doing this, and that you're using your gift to make the world a better place." Amara took those words to heart, channeling her energy into projects that aligned with her values. She collaborated with anti-bullying campaigns, recorded songs for charity albums, and mentored aspiring musicians from underserved communities. Through it all, she carried with her the lessons she had learned: that vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness, that kindness has the power to heal wounds, and that everyone, no matter their circumstances, has a unique light to shine. By the end of the year, Amara's influence extended far beyond her hometown. She was invited to perform at prestigious venues, including a gala hosted by a renowned humanitarian organization. Standing on stage in front of influential leaders and philanthropists, she sang a heartfelt rendition of the same hymn she had performed in the cafeteria months earlier. The audience listened in awe, moved not only by her vocal prowess but also by the depth of emotion she conveyed. When she finished, the room erupted into applause, followed by a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Afterward, organizers presented her with an award recognizing her contributions to promoting empathy and understanding through music. As she accepted the trophy, Amara fought back tears, overwhelmed by the realization of how far she had come. "This isn't just my story," she said, holding the award aloft. "It belongs to everyone who has ever felt unseen or unheard. To anyone out there struggling to find their voice, you are not alone. Keep believing in yourself, because your light matters." That night, as she walked off stage, Amara reflected on the journey that had led her here. From the lonely days spent singing by her bedroom window to the packed auditoriums cheering her name, she had defied every expectation placed upon her. Yet despite the accolades and admiration, she knew that her greatest accomplishment wasn't the awards or the fame. It was the ripple effect of her actions. By choosing to use her voice for good, she had inspired countless others to do the same. And as she looked toward the future, one thing was certain: Amara's story was far from over. With each new opportunity, she continued to grow, not just as an artist but as a person committed to making the world a kinder, more compassionate place. For someone who had once believed she didn't belong, she had found her place in the hearts of millions. And in doing so, she proved that even the quietest voices can spark the loudest revolutions. Months turned into years, and Amara's journey continued to unfold in ways that surpassed even her wildest dreams. The girl who had once been mocked for her worn-out shoes now stood on stages that seemed larger than life, her voice echoing through concert halls and arenas filled with thousands of people. Yet despite the glitz and glamour, she never lost sight of the values that had guided her from the very beginning: humility, resilience, and a deep commitment to uplifting others. One of the most defining moments of her career came when she was invited to compete in a national singing competition, an event watched by millions across the country. Contestants hailed from all corners of the nation, each bringing their own unique style and talent to the stage. For Amara, this was more than just another performance. It was an opportunity to show the world how far she had come. She poured countless hours into preparing, working closely with vocal coaches, choreographers, and mentors to refine her craft. But while she embraced the technical aspects of training, she also remained grounded in what truly mattered: authenticity. On the night of the finals, Amara stepped onto the grand stage wearing a flowing gown adorned with subtle embroidery that reminded her of the patchwork designs she used to mend her clothes as a child. As the spotlight illuminated her figure, she took a moment to breathe deeply, letting the magnitude of the moment wash over her. The audience fell silent, their eyes fixed on her as the first notes of her song began to play. This time, she chose an original composition, a heartfelt ballad inspired by her mother's teachings about courage and faith. Every word carried the weight of her experiences. Every note painted a vivid picture of her struggles and triumphs. When she finished, the arena erupted into thunderous applause. Judges praised not only her vocal ability but also the emotional depth of her performance. One judge, visibly moved, wiped away tears before saying, "Amara, your voice is extraordinary, but it's your spirit that truly sets you apart. You remind us all of the power of perseverance and hope." When the results were announced later that evening, there was no surprise. Amara was crowned the winner. Confetti rained down as cameras flashed, capturing her radiant smile and tear-filled eyes. In that moment, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for herself, but for everyone who had supported her along the way. But winning the competition wasn't the end of Amara's story. It was merely the beginning of a new chapter. With her newfound platform, she dedicated herself to amplifying voices that often went unheard. She launched a foundation called Voices Unseen, aimed at providing resources and opportunities for underprivileged youth interested in pursuing music and the arts. Scholarships, workshops, and mentorship programs became central pillars of the organization, ensuring that talented individuals like herself wouldn't have to face barriers alone. The impact of Voices Unseen quickly spread beyond her hometown. Schools in underserved communities received grants to upgrade their music programs, giving students access to instruments and equipment they had never dreamed of owning. Young artists traveled from neighboring towns to attend free workshops led by industry professionals, many of whom volunteered their time after hearing Amara's story. Through these initiatives, she ensured that her legacy would extend far beyond her own achievements. Her advocacy work didn't stop there. Amara partnered with global organizations to address issues such as poverty, education inequality, and mental health awareness. She visited schools, shelters, and community centers, sharing her journey and encouraging young people to embrace their individuality. During one particularly memorable visit to a juvenile detention center, she met a teenager named Elijah who reminded her of herself, young, misunderstood, and searching for purpose. After speaking with him, she promised to help fund his education upon release, offering him a second chance at life. Stories like Elijah's fueled her determination to keep pushing forward, knowing that her efforts could change lives. As her influence grew, so did her creative output. Amara released her debut album, titled From Silence to Song, which debuted at #1 on multiple charts. The album featured tracks inspired by her childhood, her parents' love, and the lessons she had learned throughout her journey. Critics hailed it as a masterpiece, praising its authenticity and emotional resonance. Fans connected deeply with songs like Mama's Melody and Rise Again, which spoke to universal themes of loss, healing, and empowerment. Proceeds from the album went directly to funding her foundation, furthering her mission to create opportunities for others. Despite her success, Amara made it a point to return home regularly. Her tiny house on the edge of town remained untouched, a symbol of where she had started and a reminder of how much she had overcome. Neighbors still waved to her as she walked down the street, treating her not as a celebrity but as the same kind-hearted girl they had always known. On weekends, she volunteered at the bakery where she had worked during high school, chatting with customers and baking batches of her favorite pastries. These simple acts kept her grounded, reminding her that true fulfillment came not from accolades but from connection. One day, while walking through the Amara Arts Center, the community hub named in her honor, she stumbled upon a group of teenagers, rehearsing for an upcoming talent show. Watching them perform brought tears to her eyes. They sang with passion, danced with joy, and laughed freely, embodying the same spirit of creativity and resilience that had carried her through difficult times. Afterward, she joined them backstage, offering words of encouragement and sharing stories from her own journey. "Never let anyone tell you that your dreams are too big," she told them, "because sometimes the hardest battles lead to the greatest victories." Years later, as Amara reflected on her life, she realized that her story wasn't just about her. It was about the collective strength of a community that refused to give up on her. From the teachers who believed in her potential to the neighbors who shared meals during tough times, she owed her success to those who had extended a helping hand. And now she was paying it forward, using her voice to inspire others to find theirs. In interviews, she often recalled the day in the cafeteria, when everything changed. "That moment taught me something important," she said. "It taught me that we all have power within us, power to rise above negativity, to transform pain into purpose, and to shine even in the darkest places. My voice may have silenced doubters that day, but it also gave me permission to believe in myself." Today, Amara continues to tour, record, and advocate for causes close to her heart. She has become a household name, not because of fame itself, but because of the message she carries that everyone deserves to be seen, heard, and valued. Whether performing for sold-out crowds or mentoring aspiring artists, she remains steadfast in her belief that kindness and courage can change the world. And as she stands beneath the spotlight, microphone in hand, she knows one thing for certain. Her journey is proof that even the quietest voices can make the loudest impact. For Amara, the melody of her life isn't defined by the highs or lows. It's shaped by the unwavering belief that every note matters and every voice deserves to be heard.